Hey guys, uh, I'm Rodney. That's Ben, or wherever he is. Oh, welcome to Amusing Minds. And today, Ben, I definitely want to talk about something I've heard before, and I'm sure you've heard this before. Different ways of essentially like uh, universal energy, or it'll happen when it'll happen kind of things, or fate, or reasoning. And we talked a little bit pre-show about this, but I want to dive into this a little bit. Um, does the universe have a grand mechanical thing that's actually playing out, or is it all random? What's your opinion on that? Because I think, based off of what we were just talking about, we might have a slight difference of opinion.
I think that humans have a tendency to uh, prescribe meaning to things that otherwise might not have any meaning. Coincidences become, uh, you know, um, intervention from something greater than ourselves, and I think it's a coping mechanism that we use to explain things that happen to us that we view as good or bad, or anything in between. I don't think that the universe is out there telling us anything other than what we want to perceive it telling us.
Interesting. So before I just go into exact like disagreement mode, have you ever, and I wish I could pinpoint these stories. Have you ever heard about different scenarios? Because I've heard these, but I can't exactly remember the exact one, so I'm just gonna kind of get a vague. Um, there's stories about like how in like ancient or old African tribes, um, people would prepare food a certain way, and it would make its way down generations, and then somebody would come and be like, "Well, I don't understand why they're slapping this branches on a rock. Like they always feel like they have to do that." And then they change up the method because it didn't make sense, and then something would be wrong, and then you would find out later that the slapping it against this rock somehow had a chemical reaction that affected the flavor of this food. And there's like different things like that, like people who would like uh, clean themselves in certain ways, and they did it for like a belief or reason, but they didn't actually understand that the effect of what they were doing and why they were doing it. It was just well, this is the way somebody did it, and it's always worked for our family, so we always do that, right? So those things happen. Now, people don't understand why they're working, but they continue to do those, and then later we find out that, oh, there's a scientific explanation. So with those
Okay,
kind of things, yeah, okay, you see where I'm going with this?
you take it to the end.
I was
I'll
gonna
let you
say,
say it.
so yeah, so with those kind of things, well, no one knows the sure answer. People do formulate these superstitions or these patterns that have successful outcomes, and their reasoning behind doing it might technically not even be right, but somehow it still works itself out to be right, but not for a reason they don't understand, right? So then could one argue that maybe that is part of that grander scheme of things? Sometimes we have a sense for something is right, and we form a superstition or a pattern around it, and our reasoning is wrong, but the method still creates a positive result.
Or is it a bunch of trial and error, and the one thing that did work is the thing that stuck? And that was the thing, that was the method that was passed down because it worked. Just because they don't know why it works doesn't negate the fact that there is a pattern being recognized of, I do this, I get this result. And 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 you're just talking about the scientific method without a person understanding that it's science potentially.
Sure, like so we're labeling it as like you label it as the scientific method, but then the scientific method is like the result of our existence, right? Like we're humans are the only one that care about the scientific method necessarily. Uh, but there's tons of animals that have evolved and adapt and changed based on patterns and this continuous like this works. So in essence, evolution or adaptability repeats itself. Now, you could argue, well, scientific method for people, but what about creatures and animals that evolve and change to adapt and it works so it continues down that pattern?
Hmm. What about
So
it?
is that not in a way like nature or the universe doing that? Is there not does it not match the thing of maybe there's a bigger design to this or a like a
Yeah,
function?
it sounds like what you're saying is that there there is an external influence on how how these behaviors and patterns are going to end up, so to be the best outcome. But on the other side, you have it's going to be the best outcome because that's what's going to get you the best survival rate. You know, so it could be complete random trial and error, and the ones who survive are the ones who had the successful uh, behaviors based on patterns, and the ones who didn't died out. And so adaptability, you know, going all the way to evolution, doesn't necessarily mean that there's somebody behind the curtain pulling on the strings saying that, you know, this bird needs to develop this beak to eat these kind of seeds because that's what's going to make them survive.
Yes. Okay. So real quick, I'm not making a case for someone behind the scenes pulling the strings necessarily, but I am kind of playing with this thought of the universe as a whole has patterns that result in a way in the same like so for instance, pretty much every single celestial body is round, right? It's a sphere. There's there's a consistency to that. So it's to me it's a little bit more than just random because if it was just random, then you would have all sorts of different shapes and all sorts of different functions, but specifically just taking like the sphere or a circle, you scale up all the way as big as we've ever seen and you scale down as small as we can see, and sphere tends to be the shape, right? So there's a
Okay,
consistency in everything, right? So so there is a some level of consistency and it's not random. Like now you might have variants of that, but it still falls within those parameters of like there's structure to this to some level to everything that we can so far we've been able to analyze past like into the scientific method, right?
sure. I mean, neither of us are experts in physics, or going as far as quantum mechanics or theoretical physics and like things that break the rules. But if we go with our basic understanding of here are the rules of how physics works,
Right.
there seems to be a pattern. But that's what I was trying to get at earlier, was are we prescribing meaning to something that's just there, or is it just there? Okay, yeah, it's spheres, but why is that significant? It's all spheres, but is that really significant, or is that just the rules of physics, and it's the simplest way for for things to react to gravity, or electrons in orbit, you know, um, all the way down to the atomic level. Like, why does a sphere have to have meaning or be significant? And I'm saying that it's a human thing to prescribe that meaning to something that is just there.
Interesting. I well, so here's the thing. I think that if you take the just yes, I think we do start with a we're trying to give it meaning or trying to give it some understanding, but that's a part of us. We want to understand all of it. At least some of us do. Um and but I think when you talk about like the scientific method as a whole, you have to form essentially a hypothesis first before you try to figure out if the answer is right or wrong, right? Now in older times, I think still today, but more so in older times, I think that that was that prescribed meaning. Like if this thing happens every time we do this thing, it's because of this. So we're constructing an idea of, well, we think this means this. Now, with some research and study, we have found often with certain things that our reasoning was wrong, right? So like the meaning of it was inaccurate to our assumptions of its meaning. However, there was a meaning or a function of said thing, just not the way we understood it. So like for instance, like you might say, let's see. I don't want to dive down the religious route too crazy, but like you might say let somebody that goes and eats a certain, I don't know, sailors eat acidic fruit on the ocean and they could have formed some superstition, well we got to always have oranges, and not understood that that's what helped fight scurvy, right? Uh and so they might have formed the idea that it's, these oranges are magical, but like so they didn't understand that it was what it was wasn't magic, it was a scientific thing, but it didn't take away the meaning or the function of this helps you from this, right?
Yeah.
So
Didn't the
then
Thor movie have a line that was like, magic is just science you don't understand?
yes, that that's my take on it is I don't think it's all random. I just don't think we fully understand it yet.
Right. And see, this is where I used to be. For a period of my life, I was in the thought camp, if you want to call it that, of I don't believe in a higher power that is personified,
Yeah.
um, but that I do believe that there are things out there that we don't understand yet that might explain a lot of these superstitions, or there are things that we won't be able to explain, and that there's some magic left in the world. And now I'm older and I guess more cynical because there's no magic left for me, Rodney.
Disagree. I just don't think you see it that way. But no, that's so here's the thing. Like you can I would argue that to some level you could say that, but in reality, like things happen that are outside of our control, right? But you can technically you could make everything be within your control. You really could. You could set yourself up in a scenario um from a purely like actual reality standpoint, you could position everything to work the way you want it to work. And even then, stuff still goes wrong or stuff still happens.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter
Um,
how much, right?
we just had an episode about bad luck.
Yeah.
The idea of luck is not really in your control, and we had this whole talk about, when things aren't in your control, how do you cope with that. But now we're getting into more of the philosophy of, you know these things that can happen to you, your circumstances, are they really in your control? Is there some greater personification out there that is controlling it for you and has a plan? Or are you subject to the laws of science, and it's just things that we don't perceive that are happening to us that cause certain behaviors or certain things to happen to us, and we just don't understand why that is.
So that's I would say I would argue that it's a little bit of both. And here's why I say that. Here's why I say kind of. but I also don't like, so I don't think there's a grand, like, masterful manipulator of all of the things in the universe necessarily. If there is something at that level, in my humble opinion, it does not care about our individual actions, um, because it it wouldn't, or if it does, then it's irrelevant and our whole existence is meaningless. But that's a whole nother drive. But however, I do think that our ability to essentially even have these kind of conversations means that we're intelligent enough to be able to perceive a lot about reality. Even in that, I think the fact that we can do that and we know that we are minuscule in the grand scheme of all of existence, the idea to think that there's not something a level up from us, to me, is like, doesn't even make sense. Like, it'd be the equivalent of, like, this is a bad example, but like an ant being like, nope, there's nothing smarter than us. Ants are the smartest things in the whole world. It 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 doesn't make sense. And the fact that we can see ants, and then that we can look up at the sky and go, yeah, that all
Hmm.
exists. I'm like, there's probably some greater forces in the universe. Now, as far as my life is concerned, and the things that I have to deal with, luck or like the randomness, that those things. Hold on, there was a bunch said, and I wanted to law. Oh, you said laws of science. So I, even in that, like, laws of science, I think it's an interesting phrasing or way to make things. Laws are what is hold on, how's it? There's a funny quote I was gonna do. Laws are the dominant force holding down, no, but no, laws are subject to change,
Uh-huh.
um, subject to change with new information or based off of understanding. So, like, even within the laws of science, there are things we do and don't understand. I don't know where I was going with this. It's like a lot, but I think that
There
stuff
is
can,
a lot to it, and it's a lot to
yeah,
chew on. You can take your time with it.
yeah. It's which one I want to tackle first, because it's that I think that the random happenstance or our beliefs can actually, that's where I want to go with it. So I think that those things can shape our reality to a certain level. So, for instance, in the smallest way, perception. I think I might have covered this on a different episode, but your perception on your reality, I think, can affect your reality. Some people think like manifestation, and I would argue I don't necessarily agree with that per se. I think that's a little bit too magical for me. However,
Yeah.
however, I do think that if I have a positive mindset and I always try to look for the positive of the occurrence no matter what, I will, there in some method or way, by doing so, I will allow for more positivity to come to me, and in that, the effects of that will then have a more positive life. Therefore, we talked about on the prior episode the kind of looking at the path and looking for the path and not the trees. This is very similar to me, whereas, like, I'm like, if something's shitty happens, I make as much effort as I can to look for the lesson or the positive, or how do I move in the positive direction. And because of that, personally, every person I've ever known that lives that way has a pretty decent life. And every person I know that does the opposite has a shitty life. Now, that could be me looking for meaning or pattern, but man, science tells me if you look at something and you get the same results consistently, then there's something to it.
Yeah, I think that you're right, and there's definitely something to our perception or our outlook on life and how that can affect the choices that we make and the behaviors that we have. And I was in therapy for a little while, and uh, had to learn very quickly that it's not about fixing things in your head. It's it's about allowing whatever's going to happen in your brain to just happen, to be more aware, and having that heightened awareness can help you cope and can help you make decisions about your behavior. Because we as humans have a forebrain, and all our emotions come from in the middle here, in a slightly more primitive part of our brain. And if the emotions drive our decision making, then yeah, we could get stuck in a cycle. But if we allow things to, if we allow ourselves to feel, and we are just aware of it, and we let that pass, then we can make decisions with using our forebrain on what do we want to do, and and I think what you're talking about is along those same lines. Your outlook. If your outlook is positive, then you're going to want to make choices that continue that positivity. You know, and if your outlook is very negative, then you might get stuck in a cycle of making decisions that continue to be in that negative emotional state. There's I've always said that there's something about the comfort of something you're familiar with, and it's usually a feeling. And if you are used to feeling like crap, then subconsciously you might find ways to make yourself feel like crap because that's safe.
Right.
And feeling some other way feels very unsafe. But back to what we were kind of touching on. I actually wanted to mention, like, because before we started the talk today, I threw out there that, like, sometimes people say to me, "Oh, the universe this or the universe that," and when I was a kid, it was God this and God that. God has a plan for you, and God's going to do this and that. And over the years, it seems like the people around me changed, and and that, and now it seems like there's this kind of halfway in, halfway out. Like, they're not religious, but there's still that thing that it feels like they're personifying into a force that makes decisions for your life specifically. So, like, I posted about all my bad luck, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody commented, um, the universe is testing you, and you're gonna be able to get through this because, um, because you're strong and whatever. It was a
Yeah.
good positive message, and I'm not trying to poo poo on somebody that was just trying to be nice, but what I'm saying is that there was still that superstition in there of, like, there is this greater force beyond us that's thinking about me specifically and is testing me through these circumstances of my life that, in my view, was a bunch of random happenstance. And some of it was, I didn't do preventative maintenance on an engine that is known to have issues, but I didn't know any of that because I didn't research that particular engine, and I didn't know what I was getting into with that truck.
Right.
The I didn't research ahead of time knowing that the convention was split because of a citywide event elsewhere, and that the
Right.
crowd was going to be thin. it, you know had I looked at that stuff ahead of time, maybe it wouldn't have been as upsetting. Maybe I could have planned for that or coped with it before it all happened all at once, and left me in a desperate emotional state.
Right.
But what do you think about people using the term universe in that way? Do you run into that a lot, or, like, what do you think?
So I think this one's interesting. Um, because I have noticed very similar. Like, people want magic. They want God. They want the universe. They want this powerful entity that shapes their reality. And personally, I think a lot of that happens because their lack of self. Um, if Even if, let's assume that just for the sake of this, Christian God is real, right? Let's assume. I don't know. I have no idea. I have no evidence that tells me he doesn't. I don't have any evidence that tells me he necessarily does that I can put on a piece of paper with any real level of confidence. However, I personally think there is something greater or grander that you could define as maybe a god. However, I don't think it's an active entity influencing our lives. And if it did exist and it created us, and we assume that it's the Christian God, I still make the case that it's not interacting with what we're doing. I think that it gave us all the necessary tools to interact with our own life. And and so people that say, oh, that's God's plan, or this is, like that's the universe way of testing you. I I think I'm going to. I'm going to make an argument for why they're wrong, and I'm going to make an argument for why they might be right. So,
Okay.
personally, I think that they're wrong because, as you kind of said, had you done your research, you could pinpoint two, three, four things that you could have easily changed that would have changed the outcome of everything that happened to you in your negative circumstances. So there's a very logical approach to that, right? However, to make the argument for the case of God or grander entity, maybe that was the lesson because we're equipped, especially specifically just me and you, we are equipped with very powerful tools in ourselves. Our minds tend to be a little bit more forward thinking. We tend to plan out the bigger picture. Um, so we tend to see the grander design, and in our abilities to see the bigger design of things, the things that me and you think are very common or simple or can be broken down, if we just take the time to understand, others can't see that way. So they assign God, but nevertheless, maybe that's part of it. Like if I'm making the case for this grander entity, we are unique in a way because even though everyone has the same components that make them up, they all have brains, they all have the ability to think, they don't think the same as us. And then like you could try to delve into that scientifically a lot, but like that that also could be a case for the grander design. Maybe there was a lesson in there of like, and it could be a small lesson, you showing yourself, I need to be more diligent about doing certain things before I go out and try to do these. Like you could very easily, even in the scientific way, you could go retrospectively, or retroactive, whatever. Looking back, I can see that I could have made better decisions. You learned something there. It may not have been a ton, but you learned a thing. So the ability to learn and the fact that you did could be random happenstance. It could be. It could just be like, yeah, a bunch of bad shit just happened and I should have outthought this. I should have thought better. But it also could be the universe teaching you to step back and see where you could think better, improve on the thing that you already have because you are capable of doing so where others are not.
Yeah, I suppose another way to think about what I said, and still using the same terminology, if the universe is not personified and is just an impersonal um, force, right? Then the things that happen to me, the circumstances, are part of that universe. They are things that happened because of the way physics works. You know, heat and friction built up in the engine and it blew itself up, and I had a bad time because of that. But now, anytime I'm going to drive somewhere with a vehicle, I'm checking particular things. I'm doing research to see what the preventative maintenance is on a particular car because I don't want that to happen again. So did the universe teach me a lesson?
Yeah.
It seems it did, but it's not like a personified universe that did it on purpose. It was just It's a way to describe the set of natural circumstances and things that happened that caused me an emotional response, and I derived a lesson. I prescribed meaning to this thing that happened to me.
Yeah. And that and the funny thing about this is, and I think this is almost like the beauty of why, like, specifically, like, religions are interesting, is because some of it you just can't disprove, and for the amount of resources necessary to do so are so vast and dramatic that it's just like, at least now, it's just not even in our ability. Um, but I think that's what a lot of people actually are doing. I think the same way that, like, me or you, like, you mechanically minded, you can learn how to fix your own truck or build an ATV. You have the patience and the right equipment in your brain to do that with not ease, but ease, with relative ease, right? Comparably,
YouTube helps a lot.
right? But even then, comparably, you are more equipped for that. Same. I'm very similar. Like, I taught myself how to program enough. I've taught myself a lot of skills. And then when people see me execute these skills that I've spent weeks or months teaching myself, there's a certain level of, like, they're impressed or envious of this thing. And I'm like, well, you could do this too, but they aren't equipped to do that. And because of that, I think that's where you get these magical assignments of grander beings. I think this is why people idolize people, like famous people and other things. We've talked about this, a small tangent, but we've talked about this before, I think, a little bit, as far as, like famous people. I rarely care about famous people. They don't impress me. They're they don't do anything that I can't do in my brain. And because of that, like, it's rare that I idolize a person. There are some exceptions I have. I think I've talked about that on a talk before, like other artists that I'm like, oh God. But I look up to them as as far as, like, I understand the amount of effort it took for them to get to their skill set. Um, but, like, yeah, people, I don't idolize people, and I don't look at people as grander than myself because of my understanding of the world. But I also understand there's a lot of people that don't think that way. And if you can't see how you could be great like someone else, it's very easy for you to then start assigning things that are explainable to grander beings or power.
Right.
Just gotta sit on that one for a sec.
No, that was good. That was really good. Yeah, it's that boundary that we were talking about, where it seems like there's this limit to our perception and understanding, and when you push past that boundary, there needs to be an explanation for that. And scientists would just say, well, we don't know, and we're okay with not knowing. But if you're the kind of person who's not okay with I don't know, and that um, you need to know what's beyond that boundary, then yeah, it's easy to assign whatever's past our understanding to an entity, a force, a thing that is greater and bigger than ourselves, because then we don't have to be scared of the thing that we don't know. We just say, oh well, it's unknowable, and we're not supposed to know it. This other thing out there, it knows, and and then let all the dogma fall in place with whatever your belief system tells you from there. But it all starts with what what is beyond my understanding, and how can I be comforted in beyond in what I don't know.
You know what'd be interesting? And
What's that?
this is off kilter of our show, but I just kind of want to have a side conversation. This whatever. I think it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, whatever. Let's go.
If let's say, okay, so to be fair, neither me or you can honestly say whether there is a God or not a God, right? Like for all intents and purposes.
I see no convincing evidence that there is one.
But you also don't have an argument to say that there isn't one because of the grand scale of it, the possibility,
Well,
right?
I I don't I don't have to
Yeah, no,
I don't have
yes,
to
you
be
can
I
make
don't
the argument. I don't have to be the one that proves it. You have to be the one that,
the
yeah, yeah,
the burden of proof is on the person that's making the claim. I'm not making any claims.
right.
I'm just saying that there's not evidence of one, so ipso
Ex-
facto there isn't.
People could argue existence.
Sure.
Like that's
Yeah.
because explain existence, and if you can't, then that means there's possible evidence. So, like that. Well, let's take that argument because,
Okay.
but I understand what you're saying. The burden of proof is on the person making the claim that there is. Now, with that understanding, though, would it be an interesting endeavor? And I'm sure others have done this in different ways. I'm pretty sure there's an author that wrote a book about this. What if you tried to find it? Like, what if we tried to, if the you set out with the base hypothesis of there is a grander power in the universe or beyond the universe that has designed existence, and in doing so, we have purpose. So if this hypothesis is true, what is the evidence of our purpose? And then try to go from that basis and then counter the points of kind of like a scientific study of going, okay, well, do we have a purpose? Well, what is the evidence that we do have a purpose? Is there evidence that we do have a purpose? And kind of backtrack it to see, hey, is there, because that's when people want to, hold on. Oh, let me finish. I say when people want a god, it's usually the baseline is because they want purpose.
When you say purpose,
Hmm.
do you mean why are we here? Like why are
Yeah.
humans on the planet? What is
Yes.
what is the purpose of humans
Yes.
existing? Okay.
Yes.
Just
What
making
is the
sure
reason?
I had that clarification.
Yes. What is the reason we're here? And then like, because I would argue, at least until proven otherwise, that there is something unique about us over everything else that we've seen. Now, whatever that uniqueness is, I mean, it could boil down to we're a really advanced fungi and we're just really better at doing it than the other ones. Like it that's a possibility. But it doesn't track well with me. Like it doesn't make sense to me. Um so like my brain goes, okay, so then why? Like what are we really the results of a bunch of random shit happening over 100 billion years? Like is that what we are? Are we complex bugs? Um or or is there more? And then if there is more, what the fuck is it?
Right? I mean, purpose of why we are here, uh, to even suggest the notion that humans are special in our universe seems egocentric.
Yes, 100%. I'm
Yeah.
plugging in my thing. I think my headset's gonna die, so don't mind my
Okay.
disappearance. Uh,
um, it seems egocentric, but
let's say it is.
we are the only planet that we know of that has life like ours. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist somewhere else. We just don't know about it. And part of that, and again, it's like we're pushing up against that boundary. What's beyond the boundary? Well, we are, it could be we are the most important thing and we were designed because there is nothing else like us. Or it could just be that right place, right time. You know, Mars used to have oceans and lakes and rivers and probably had life. And then its atmosphere dried up. Its atmosphere thinned out, all the water dried up, and the planet died. At some point in the distant distant past. Um, so if there was life on Mars before there was life here, did they have these same conversations? Did they think they were the most special thing in the universe because it was just a matter of we didn't exist at the same time, so we each think that we're special?
Shoot, it could have been us. But then you can
Yeah,
spiral down a whole rabbit hole.
that's a whole other thing.
But like,
Um,
just this in general though, like, okay, so scientific method, right? So let's go science with this. Okay. As of now, we are the only things that we know of that has an ego. So egocentric, yes, I'd even agree with that. 100% ego driven. But we're the ones that have the ego to perceive at all. And we've made some really cool, as a collective, we've made some really cool devices that have let us see very far into this grander thing. And we have still yet, over our, let's say, a couple hundred years of being able to do this, found any glimmer or sign that there's anything even close to us. But almost everything else, we've found evidence of repeated in the universe. Like, we found other planets, we found other stars. It's really easy to find other stars. We find other galaxies. We even seen a few planets that have what could be a sustainable environment for life like ours to live. But like, man, we still haven't found anything that's like even close to us. And it's, to me, that's a little strange. I actually personally think there is. I think there's other life, intelligent life in the universe, but even I this to me that doesn't even diminish the special nature of us. It's like, I think that maybe there's more to it than just us. Maybe there are more intelligent life forms out there,
there could be.
and that to me that doesn't even that doesn't take away from the fact that there might be a grander purpose to all of this, right? Because just because I have purpose doesn't mean some alien doesn't have purpose, you know?
True, true. Um, I Googled and found something that you might find
Cool.
interesting. Um, March 2024. So this is fairly recent. A Yale psychiatrist turns to science to look for answers to what is life's purpose, right? Um, Samuel Wilkinson, his book is called Purpose: What Evolution and Human Nature Imply About the Meaning of Our Existence.
Okay.
He's an associate professor of psychiatry at the Yale School of Medicine. And here's something he said: when you combine the concept that we are free to choose with the dual potential of human nature, to me, this strongly implies that life is a test. The purpose of life is to choose between the good and evil impulses inherent within us. It seems to be written into our DNA.
Okay.
That's a pretty good hook. Like that's interesting.
See that? Go ahead.
The article goes on. It's a little bit of an interview with him, but his basic premise is a little bit more on the human mind side of things. I mean, being a psychiatrist, that's what I would expect him to be more on the side of. Whereas we were just talking more astronomical as opposed to the mind. But we were talking about the human mind earlier, so it is definitely something that it looks like scientists are trying to figure out, trying to find what is our meaning and what is our purpose. The one other thing I wanted to throw out there, um, when I participated in therapy, one of the things that I needed to cope with was, life's purpose. This it was kind of an existential thing in my mind where I didn't have a lot of self value, and the therapist took me through an exercise to get down to the most base reason why I might have value as a person in life.
Right.
And it boiled down to I exist. I have value because I exist. And so sometimes I wonder if the reason for life's existence is just to exist, because it's a very freeing thought to say that if my purpose is just to exist, there's no pressure. There's nothing I'm supposed to do. I can just be. And not only is that enough, but that's exactly what I'm supposed to do, is just be.
Yeah. I would actually that's so if you asked me to go, hey, if you had to answer like right now, what do you think it is? I don't know, but I personally, yeah, I think it's just I think our whole reason is to experience the universe. I think that there's in in short, it's exist, but to me it's to experience life. That is the point. It is to experience life. Um, but I also kind of teeter totter back in between this theory of like there is a God. I'm gonna do that in quotations, and God created everything because it was lonely, so it wanted to make a pair, so that it had to make an equal form to itself, and the only way to make an equal form to something that is something is essentially to take away from yourself and make a copy. Uh, so the universe, all of us that are in intelligent life are basically just the universe experience in itself, so that it has a match. So that when it's all said and done, it now has a pairing that on a grander cosmic level knows it on the same level. So now it has something that it can pair with.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
That'd make a real sick comic book idea.
I'm sure it's been done before. Like
Probably.
it probably's been done before. But yeah, so like I would even agree with so what you were saying. Like it's just to be here. Yeah, I think that could be the answer. That could be the whole point, is just to exist. But that still does leave an open thought and discussion for people, is even if the reason is just to exist and that's our whole purpose, is there something grander than ourselves? And I think it's a question that we have to ask our audience. What do you guys think? Do you think there's a purpose? Do you think there's something grander than ourselves? Is there a God? Is there no God? Who knows?
It's all about the questions. Asking the questions is more important than the answers. Stay curious, ask questions, and always keep looking for the answer. By the way, spoiler, it's 42. Everybody knows it's 42. I had to throw that in there.
Yeah.
So today we opened up with a pretty intense talk about um, whether or not there is some force beyond our understanding that is influencing us, has control over our lives, or cares about what our individual lives are like, all the way to exploration of space. And the possibilities out there are endless, because it's it's pretty close to infinite out there, and there's there's a lot that we haven't seen. And then we brought it all back to just the simple question of, why are we here? Well, it's probably because we're just here to exist and or like you said, experience. And if there is something after this life, we're taking those experiences and putting them back into that collective of experience. And there's a lot of great shows that explore this topic.
Yeah. Oh god.
Miracle
That's a
Workers
whole
season 1 is great. Good Place is awesome.
love a good place.
What are some other ones that I've heard really good things about? Good Omens, but I haven't seen it yet, and I know I need
I
to
haven't
watch it.
either.
Okay.
I'll have to check that out.
Does anybody out there have any suggestions for popular media that explores these topics and gets us asking those questions, or at least being entertained uh, by some interesting, imaginative answers to those questions?
Yeah.
Well, until next time, I'm Ben. That was Rodney. This is Amusing Minds, and we'll talk again next time.